Protesters staged a seventh night of anti-government demonstrations last night following the arrest and imprisonment of Mr Imamoglu. Nearly 1,500 people have been arrested in the past week of mass protests, including journalists and lawyers. The leader of the CHP has called for a mass rally on Saturday in protest against Mr Imamoglu's detention and has demanded an early election.
Man, those are some powerful images. And after 2 years of constantly hearing about democracy being on the ballot, I have to say, as an American, I'm ashamed that this story, this battle on the streets in Turkey is not on the front page of every newspaper every day. This is civil disobedience. This is people standing up, trying to prevent a dictatorship from emerging. They've lived in Turkey under a really emerging authoritarianism that has now fully emerged, and they're trying to prevent a dictatorship. And again, and I'm talking to all our friends in the media, really everybody's concerns about democracy around the world are fraudulent if they're not speaking about this issue. So Justin and I and Not Your Daddy's America are really, really intensely excited about having this conversation. And we have a phenomenal guest today, Nül Tol, the founding director of the Middle East Institute's Turkey program, and the author of a prescient book, Erdogan's War, A Strong Man's Struggle at Home and in Syria. And this is The Emerging Dictator. Don't lose his face. Welcome to Really American Media, Nül.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me.
You know, besides your book, there's a lot of stuff, hot takes that you've had over the last week. And more. I think I forgot how many days it's been. But immediately after President Erdogan had a call on March 16th with President Trump, he jailed his leading political opponent, the mayor of Istanbul, Mayor Imamoglu, who definitely was going to beat him in an election. He can't beat him in an election, so he jailed him. You've written a lot of great stuff. I recommend people just Google your foreign affairs article, your FT article. But this is a bit of a wonky question. But I think we got to set the context. It wasn't too long ago that people looked at Turkey and said, this is a model modern Islamic democracy. In fact, even though he remembers it differently in his memoirs, President Obama certainly pushed other countries to kind of follow Tunisia, Egypt, to follow the model of the AKP. How did it go wrong? Did people not see something? How did it go wrong so quickly? How did we go from this is the model Muslim democracy to this is the dictatorship for the ages?
Well, great question, Andy. And I think, so how do you miss that transformation? It's not difficult, especially for the Washington crowd. You just don't pay attention to what an autocrat is doing to his own people and just focus on how, quote unquote, helpful he is on the foreign policy front, right? So many people, including President Obama, really thought that Turkey is in a great neighborhood, a very important neighborhood, and they had expected Erdogan to play a very constructive, important role in everything that is very important to American and European interests. So that's why they turned a blind eye to what he was doing to Turkey's institutions and democracy. And in that book, I basically said, you have to understand what Erdogan is doing on the foreign policy front. You have to look at what he's doing at home, because everything that he's done on the foreign policy, it's always been a tool for him to consolidate his autocracy. But here we are in a world where we have President Trump in the White House, who wants to solve things, who wants to get deals done. And he sees Erdogan as a strong man who can help him get there. And Europeans too, I must say. I didn't have high expectations from this White House, given what they've been doing in terms of American democracy here. But Europeans, their muted response to...
shame on them. I mean, we heard yesterday the leader of CHP rip on the British Prime Minister, and really shame on Europe.
Yeah. That is true, and it's still no response, no real response, and I think that's short-sighted, because Europeans are now feeling vulnerable. They think that they're all left alone by the United States, that they have to defend themselves and their future against a resurgent, aggressive Russia, and they feel like they need Erdogan. But here is the problem. I understand. I'm not naive. I understand that Turkey has a huge army. I understand why European countries want to engage Turkey to boost their defenses. But on the other hand, the strategy must be, if you really want to protect the free world against autocrats, you cannot just rely on boosting defenses. You really have to reclaim democratic values and ideals. And you have to push Turkey. You have to push Erdogan to do the right things at home. And jailing your top opponent is not one of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. This comes right after his call with President Trump. So you just had a great piece in Foreign Affairs where you basically argue that Turkey has gone from a competitive authoritarian system now more towards a full-blown autocracy. So given the attacks that we're actually seeing on different democratic institutions here in the United States, the press, civil service, law firms, can you describe that devolution and why there wasn't really more resistance up until this point?
You mean in Turkey? Resistance to Erdogan? Well, you have to remember, in countries like Turkey, where the repression is strong, it's difficult for people to take to the streets. And right now, I must say that I'm very proud of those young people, especially university students, who have taken a huge risk. Their whole life is ahead of them. And yet they have taken a huge risk to take to the streets. Hundreds of thousands of them are on the streets protesting. Many of them have been jailed, by the way. And opposition members of parliament are talking about not just mistreatment, but I'm quoting here one of the things that the CHP member of parliament reported after talking to lawyers of these young people, that they had been tortured. So your answer is right there. There's no rule of law. And Erdogan has taken incredible steps since 2013, and that was when the last mass protests had taken place. So since then, he has taken a lot of steps to make sure that these widespread protests do not occur again. So that's why it's a huge risk. And yet, the fact that they have taken that risk suggests that they don't see a future for themselves in Erdogan's Turkey.
Yeah. So I want to get into the personal relationship between President Trump and Erdogan. So Trump seems to go out of his way to praise Erdogan. And I should note that Elon Musk does also. But President Trump did it at Mar-a-Lago right before the inauguration. Last week, he called him a great leader. Is this, and we've seen none of this in the press in America, by the way. It's crazy. I actually didn't even know all this was happening in Turkey until Endy was telling me about it. Do you think that the relationship between Trump and Erdogan, is Trump emboldening Erdogan and helping him turn Turkey into a more full-blown autocracy?
Certainly. I mean, from a political science point of view, you really have to wait and conduct research on this to make any assessment. But just like anyone else, and I've been talking to a lot of people on the street, protesters and people close to Erdogan too, who are saying that, yes, he is emboldened because he understands that he won't receive a pushback from anyone, not from European Union, certainly not from this White House. And just yesterday, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan held meetings with Marco Rubio. And in that meeting, I've heard from my contacts that the issue of protests and arrest of İmamoğlu has never been raised by Marco Rubio. And in fact, it was Hakan Fidan who preemptively said that right before they started their meeting, that there were these protests going on. And again, according to my contacts, Marco Rubio said, well, don't worry about it. We have our own house that we have to put in order. So those things really matter. Those things matter because, fight for democracy is a global fight. And autocrats, they have each other's backs. So democratic actors should have each other's backs as well. But we're not seeing that. And if you talk to Marco Rubio and Trump administration officials, what they see in Erdogan is this quote-unquote great leader who can make things happen. He may make things happen for Washington, but certainly he is destroying Turkey's future. So I know, for example, Ukraine was one thing that the two foreign ministers discussed. Washington thinks that Turkey can play a great role. They are now trying to secure a ceasefire, and they're asking Turkey to, if necessary, put boots on the ground. And there is also the issue of defense partnership. Trump is very keen on intensifying that defense partnership with Erdogan. And in that phone conversation, one of the first things Erdogan mentioned was he wants the CAATSA sanctions that were put in place in 2020 after Turkey purchased the Russian S-400 missile systems. He wants them removed. And reportedly, Trump had promised Erdogan that he will do his best. So Erdogan wants a closer defense partnership. And let's remember that he is also, his family is making money out of this too. His son-in-law is the one who is making drones. So, and President Trump sees no problem there. He thinks,
and that's a boomerang. I mean, I just have to, whatever people are thinking about Erdogan playing, whether it's in Black Sea or Russia, İmamoğlu would be, or anybody, I actually think would be a similar partner. Turkey's stance in the Black Sea are because of Turkey's interests. Turkey's a Black Sea power. Turkey, before Erdogan, had a defense partnership with the United States, actually probably a better one. And when Gönül was talking about CAATSA, which is, let's remember what CAATSA stands for, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions. Think about Turkey being subject to CAATSA. That means it has sided with America's enemies. And we come from, Gönül and I come from a part of the world where there's a saying in different languages, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. Erdogan hosted Hamas just a couple of weeks ago. Erdogan, I have sources too that says one of the things he asked Secretary Rubio for is lifting sanctions against the terrorists who now happen to be Syria's president, right? Erdogan is siding up with terrorists and America's enemies, and we're going to bolster him vis-a-vis people fighting for democracy who are probably, and by the way, Erdogan has overseen a spike, and it's his base that's anti-American, not his opposition. His base is anti-American. But I want to go back outside of Erdogan, because you talked about the muted response and being proud of these kids who are on the streets. And there's an image that I want to get to, because images have, pictures have said 1,000 words, and there's some great images from the last election, but of the whirling dervish standing up. This is, it's almost like the kid in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square. Are people just standing up because they figured out nobody else is standing up for them? Have all the other democratic institutions been so dismantled? Can you tell us about the press and the courts and the civil service? Is it that all these other institutions have been dismantled to such an extent that the demos, the people, have just decided we're stepping up? And one note on the press, before we shot, I saw that Mark Lowen, the BBC journalist, who's lived in Turkey, loves Turkey. All he talks about is living in Turkey. He got arrested and deported back to the UK today. So.
Yes, that's a good question, because this is about the street protests are about the only remaining tool for anyone who is opposed Erdogan turning the country into a Russia-style autocracy, right? That's what I in fact, before I wrote my Financial Times piece, I had the opportunity to speak with one of these young protesters who is a student of the top university in Turkey. And she told me that, they don't see a future. They feel, these were the words that she used. She feels suffocated. And she thinks that everyone has failed them. And she listed, by the way, this was striking. She not only listed the media, the institutions, Erdogan and all of that, she also said the main opposition failed us too. Europeans, Americans, everyone failed us. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that she said about the opposition was they have been so cautious until now because they were so afraid of Erdogan that they really didn't allow the young people to express this frustration. And even now, she said, even now they are trying to block us. They want this to be over. They want this to, because they are afraid of Erdogan's wrath, what Erdogan can do in response. So she says, everyone has failed us. We are all alone. We have to defend our future ourselves. So it is, to me, a very striking message. And that's why I think one of the few options, one of the few tools remaining for these people is just these street protests.
And I want to follow up on this sense of hopelessness, because you said that whether it's Europe or the United States, they see as Erdogan as somebody that can try to get something done, right? Or they can do stuff with. And in fact, forget his first decade in power, let's look at the last decade. You've seen nothing good happening for him. The lira has collapsed.
Yeah.
You've had a brain drain. I think this last weekend he arrested 1,400 people. You have more journalists in jail, not as a proportion, more journalists and PhDs in jail in Turkey, not as a percentage of GDP and total than in China. He went, as you discuss in your book, again, another commercial for Nül, but as you discuss, he went from a zero problems with neighbors foreign policy to zero neighbors without which he has problems. So what is it that people look, and then can you tell us a little bit more about what the opposition is like right now? Because as you and I both know, in a country that I deal a lot with, in Greece, they remember an old CHP, and I don't know that they're even cheering for. There are people, clearly the mayors in Greece, cheering for Imamoglu, but tell us who Imamoglu is and why this is a better, or the kids believe this is a better future for Turkey.
Well, Imamoglu is a very popular figure. So he is the mayor of. Used to be the mayor of Istanbul. Istanbul is the country's biggest city.
By the way, can we say, again, when we're talking about autocracy, not only did they arrest him, they immediately removed him from power. So let's think about, Eric Adams, mayor of New York, was indicted. He got to stay in. We've had governors, Justin, in our state. So, but... Go ahead.
And you have to ask why. That's exactly what.
Without a trial, by the way. Without a trial, they removed him from power.
That's exactly right. And if you talk to Imamoglu's lawyers spoke with the press, and they said that the entire case against Imamoglu was based on testimony from so-called secret witnesses. So that's why a lot of people in Turkey believe these are politically motivated charges. So. You have to understand what Erdogan is trying to do here. He's trying to do two things. He's not only blocking a very strong rival from running against him in 2028 presidential elections. He also wants the vast resources of Istanbul municipality. Remember, Erdogan was himself the mayor of Istanbul in the 1990s. And the city is so huge with such financial resources that he used those resources to build his own clientelistic network, which helped him stay in power and consolidate power. Now, Turkish economy is not doing well. And at a time when Turkish economy is struggling and Erdogan is facing re-election, he wants to recapture the resources of that municipality. So that's why he's gone after Ekrem İmamoğlu. He could have easily blocked him from running by just voiding his diploma, which he did, by the way, because according to Turkish law, you have to have a university diploma to run for president. And he not only voided that because that wasn't enough, because he also wants Istanbul back. So that is the level, that is what we're facing here.
Now, you've covered Erdogan and Turkey's slide into authoritarianism extensively over the years. Do you see any parallels in how Turkey started sliding into a more autocratic state and what's going on now in America with President Trump, Elon Musk, this cohort of people trying to dismantle NPR, PBS, really any arbiter of truth that could hold them accountable?
Excellent question. And yes, I'm afraid I see way too many parallels. For many years, political scientists thought that, this could never happen in a place like the United States. I mean, the literature is full of articles making the case that if you've been a democracy for longer than 50 years, you're safe. It takes a lot of effort and many years to dismantle democracy. So that's why the United States was never a case study for political scientists working on authoritarianism, right? This is, at the end of the day, the oldest democracy in the world. And yet it took one wannabe autocrat to come to power, to start dismantling all those democratic institutions. The pace is really worrying, because even, I know Andy knows this too, we are from a part of the world where we have so many reasons to be pessimistic, right? But even then, I thought that here in the United States, you have checks and balances, you have institutions. So it wouldn't happen here. But unfortunately, it is happening. That's what Trump is trying to do to this country. So when Erdogan first came to power, his number one target was the military, right? He wanted to make sure that generals were under his control. And then he went after the media. How did he do that? He utilized the fact that Turkish bourgeoisie was never independent. They relied on Turkish state for their survival, and they had business interests in elsewhere, not just in media. So he went after those media outlets to silence them. And finally, he went after the courts. So come back to the United States and see what Trump is trying to do, right? He is going after military. He's trying everything to discredit them. He is going after media. And then he's going after the courts. Now, you might say it took 20 years for Erdogan to turn Turkey into a competitive authoritarian regime, but Trump does not have that many years. But this is my answer to you. When Erdogan came to power, he had captured 37% of the vote, which was huge. But yet, still, he wasn't the one who was calling the shots. It was still the secularist establishment, right? So when he came to power in 2002, Erdogan did not have that much power. Whereas President Trump, he got elected and he already controls the Congress. He controls the Supreme Court. And with Elon Musk and the new media environment, he has control over that too. And he is discrediting mainstream media, which is working.
Unreal.
Nül, I want to give you an opportunity as we close this interview. Talk to the American people, to media and people who are very active on Twitter and political activists. how do we make these people who are literally standing up for democracy, not only in Turkey, but they're trying to prevent a very harmful precedent from taking hold that will have an effect everywhere. How can they back those people? Who can they follow? Which voices can they amplify? And what images and what are the next things they should be looking for?
Well, I was born in Turkey, and my whole family, my heart belongs to Turkey, but I'm also an American citizen. So I am very worried about what's happening to democracy across the world. And I think this is a fight that we all have to fight on a daily basis. Right now, Erdogan is trying to shut down opposition media outlets so they won't cover the protests. And here in this country, the media outlets are too busy covering everything President Trump is doing, which leaves only social media as the most effective venue. So I would urge your followers to amplify the voices from the ground, people who are protesting in Turkey, and tell your congressmen, talk to them about how important this is, because this is not just an inflection point for Turkey's democratic future, but for this country too.
Thanks, Nül. And we hopefully one day we can do a program with you about democracy winning in Turkey, but that's not today. We all got to lean in to make that happen.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Nül.
Thank you.
Justin, you brought up the lessons we can learn here in the U.S., but this could be like Tiananmen, and just like we not only abandon those protesters, we then turn around and normalize the regime in China, and 30 years later, we're like, oh wow, we did something wrong. The normalization of the Erdogan regime. Pick your issue, whatever your issue. Erdogan is on the other side. If you're pro-Israel, he's pro-Hamas. If you're pro-peace, no European, no NATO member has engaged in more wars in the last decade than he. If you're concerned about ISIS and the war on terror, he has enabled ISIS and helped an ISIS offshoot, the HTS, actually capture Syria. If you're pro-human rights, he jails LGBT activists. He hits the Pride Parade with water cannons. If you're pro-free speech, there is no free speech in Turkey. If you're pro-economic sanity, this is a person who thinks you fight high inflation by cutting interest rates. There is nothing that he's on the same side as us with. Giving him American weapons when he has made it clear that he wants to steal American technology, cozying up to him and enabling him will threaten our interests and will threaten our values. And the short-termism of Europe and the United States is stunning. It worries me, not just for the battle today, but the battles of tomorrow. And then when the other side is arguably probably more pro-American and more pro-European than him, it's like, holy cow. I'm glad I shaved my head, because I'd be pulling my hair out right now.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, like, if you are pro-democracy, if you believe in individual liberties and democracy in general, and I think what scares me is, like, one, like, I've seen none of this on the news, right? You have this country that Trump is clearly loves, right? He has this fascination with Erdogan in Turkey. He sent his good friend Tom Barrack to be the ambassador. He's constantly heaping praise on Erdogan. And now he's jailing his political opponents and going from a competitive authoritarian state into a full-blown autocracy. And the administration is just getting closer with him, right? It's like, I'm shocked that we've seen none of this on the mainstream media, that we don't hear anything about it. You have who was on Tucker Carlson the other day? Was it Steve Witkoff?
Steve Witkoff?
Yeah, praising.
Steve Witkoff literally said great things happened after the phone call. Right. No, the jailing happened after.
And it's really part of, I mean, this new axis of autocrats and aspiring autocrats that Trump has aligned us with, and it's scary. You know, it's scary, and I wish people talked about more what was going on in Turkey, because Turkey's a perfect example of what could happen here, and what Trump. You know, it's probably why he admires Erdogan so much is how he's slid back.
Maybe, but I'm going to be fair to him, because even though President Obama, I got to give a whack at President Obama, because he remembers his relationship with Erdogan differently than it was. If you read his memoirs, he's like, oh, I saw Erdogan as this, dictator who was hiding. Yeah, but you also spoke to him more than you spoke to the Prime Minister of England. Your administration pushed parties in Tunisia and Egypt and elsewhere to follow his model. We have to be clear that this is a bad guy. There was right before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there was an Atlantic cover story. Since the Atlantic is all the rage, I'll just talk about the Atlantic, right? The Atlantic cover story by saying that the bad guys are winning. And it was Xi from China, Putin, Maduro from Venezuela, Lukashenko from Belarus, and Erdogan, a member of NATO, on that. And this is not a just over there problem, right? We'll show this other clip, but people forget, in Erdogan's last visit to Trump's White House, he released his goons on American protesters on American soil to beat them up, and still nobody's been held to account for it, because it's working its way through the Supreme Court. They came to American soil to beat on Americans.
Yeah, let's actually play that clip.
Back across. Get over there. Get over, don't talk. Stay.
You fit at the cost, man. Yeah, take to me. I wasn't this side.
More 14 all available.
Don't move.
Get back.
They attacked us, man. You saw them.
Hey, no, you're coming. Get over here. Hey, get back over there. Hey, you got back over there. Hey, get back over there. You're done. Save me, man. Save me, man. Let's keep those motherfuckers gotta be kidding. Come on, get across the street. Okay. Get across the street. Get across the street. Get across the street.
Down the street. To the curb.
Come in, come back. Over there. Come on. That guy. Eat. That guy. Hey, back up. He's a piece of shit terrorist.
Okay.
And that's shocking enough. A picture says 1,000 words, but that's shocking enough. But they have prosecuted Americans. A friend of mine, Henri Barkey, who used to be a State Department official, they prosecuted him in absentia, saying that he supposedly organize the coup. This is ridiculous. This is a cuckoo regime. They had one point during the coup, so you understand what kind of craziness is playing out there. There was a Christian Science Monitor journalist whose name was Scott Peterson. And the Erdogan-controlled media said that the U.S. had sent Scott Peterson, the guy who killed his wife, who had beheaded his wife, to kill Erdogan. Right? They're making up stories. And when people showed them, like, you don't know what you're talking about, they were lying. They said they had pictures from the Istanbul airport and the rest. This guy is a danger. He is a clear and present danger, not only to democracy, not only to freedom. He's a clear and present danger to America. Pick your issue. He's on the other side of it. The only issue you can be on the same side with is dictatorship. He has a problem. I mean, this administration is all about protecting Christians worldwide. Turkey, the other day, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom put Turkey on as a special watch list, which is a category, the second worst category of violators of religious freedom worldwide. Anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism. Here's another clip that we have of American soldiers on shore leave in Turkey last summer being attacked by Turkish mobs.
This morning, Turkey says 15 people have been detained after 2 U.S. Marines were physically assaulted in broad daylight while on a break during a scheduled port visit. The violent scene, caught on camera, shows several men holding the Marines, who were not in uniform, by force and placing a bag over one of their heads. At one point, one man, unable to break free, shouting for help. According to local officials, a group of 15 people, including 13 men and 2 women, attacked the service members who had been dressed in civilian clothes. The mob, part of a nationalist, anti-American youth group, were immediately apprehended. Officials say 5 other Marines were involved. The 2 Marines who were attacked are assigned to the 24th Expeditionary Unit on board the USS Wasp and were taken to a local hospital as a precaution, but sustained no injuries, according to a Navy spokesperson. The Turkish nationalist group, describing themselves online as soldiers of struggle for a fully independent Turkey, posting the assault on social media and writing, "US soldiers who carry the blood of our soldiers and thousands of Palestinians on their hands cannot dirty our country," adding, "Every time you step into these lands, we will welcome you as you deserve."
So it's something everybody should have top of the agenda. The mainstream media, maybe they feel guilty because they used to. It was only a couple of years ago that Washington Post and New York Times allowed Erdogan to peddle his nonsense in their editorial pages. Maybe they're trying to come to grips with that, but he's clearly crossed some red lines here.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we see more coverage of these protests. They're ongoing. Like you said, they jailed 1,400 people last week, jailed their political opposition, and it looks like the Trump administration is just getting closer and closer with them.
Or hopefully somebody can put you on a Signal chat where they're speaking about this, Justin.
Yeah, and so on that note, the Signal chat that just will not go away. Der Spiegel reported yesterday that Tulsi Gabbard, Mike Waltz, and Pete Hegseth, their email addresses and passwords for various accounts were publicly available online also. So this comes right after the Signal chat fiasco. You've got our top intelligence officials with their personal information and passwords publicly available online. You know, everybody talks about cyber attacks. You don't even need to hack these people. It's all out in the open now. Is this just gross incompetence? Or, I mean, like, what's going on here? And are we going to see anything happen from this? Or does Trump just double down and say nobody's getting fired? Because somebody would get fired in any other country on earth.
Well, right now, they're committing the cardinal sin in Washington, which is denying the undeniable. I don't know how long that can go. I also think there is this, clearly it was Mike Waltz who put the journalist on, put Goldberg on the Signal chat inadvertently. And I also think that there Republicans in Congress actually want to rally around Mike Waltz because they may see him as a check on some tendencies, some pro-Russian tendencies. Mike Waltz has a history of backing up our allies. Mike Waltz was a supporter of Ukraine. Mike Waltz was a supporter of the Syrian Kurds who, going back to the Erdogan example, bled and fought for us against ISIS when Erdogan wanted to enable ISIS. So maybe this has not gone further south from Republicans in Congress because they're worried about what may come after Mike Waltz. But we also, let's talk about timeline, because there's a lot of developments coming in American politics. We are only a few weeks away from Easter recess, right? We are blowing past the first 100 days. So the one big, beautiful bill is not going to get done in the first 100 days. If it doesn't advance before Easter recess, congressional, and this is for the people who are upset at Schumer, and because of the internal fight in the Democratic Party about Schumer not using his leverage when he did, Democrats may have more opportunities coming up because you will have not only the big, beautiful bill, the longer it passes, the longer the time frame goes on, the harder it becomes. You will have appropriation season coming up this summer. You will have the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, coming this summer. And then September 30th, you're going to have to do another continuing resolution with Democratic help again. So this is at the worst possible time for the Trump administration. But right now they're digging in. Yeah.
It's unreal. It's unreal because it just gets worse every single day. It's not like.
But on a positive note, the memes get better.
Yeah, we have some of those memes. The best. Let's run through the best memes that we've seen so far from this debacle. We have the one with the Lord of the Rings one first.
That one, yes, that wins. That's winner. This is one of my favorite books and movies of all time. But
yeah, and so for everyone listening, it's the good guys in Lord of the Rings. You have my sword, and you have my bow and my axe, and then there's Saruman. Am I supposed to be in this group chat? Okay.
And the Big Bird meme is, I actually think the Big Bird meme is the one most on point, because when you're on Signal, and this is not only on Mike Waltz, this has to be on everybody who was on this chat. When you're on Signal, Justin, you and I have been on text threads where you ask me, who is this number? I mean, how did nobody else have that number? And since Jeff Goldberg was actually included on it, I'm pretty sure that his name popped up somewhere. How did not anybody else look at this and say, who is this Goldberg guy that's on this thing? So, and that leads a question to, like, is there any audit being done right now to figure out what other chats have been used inappropriately and who has inadvertently been included in those chats? The Signal story is not about this Houthi attack. That happened. Maybe we were lucky that none of that information leaked. But who is going to tell us that this has not happened elsewhere? Just like the questions that were the butthurt emails, right? I think it was a legitimate critique about the private email server, about Hillary and stuff like that. But we never saw a leak of potential a national security. I still have not seen the email that put America or potentially put American troops in harm's way, while this did. And like you said, we saw from then, we remember the successful phishing attack on John Podesta. Now that all their emails and passwords are online, where are our vulnerabilities? And that's what I would like the administration, forget about addressing the scandal, address where our vulnerabilities are, because somebody just identified a pretty significant chink in the armor, and you can be sure our enemies are taking
Yeah, it's worth noting there are secure communication channels and methods that people at this level, the heads of our intelligence agencies, are supposed to use when communicating these. Doesn't matter that Jeffrey Goldberg got in the Signal chat. They shouldn't have been using an unsecured, and people say, well, Signal's secured. But when you're over Wi-Fi, and there are a variety of reasons, the military has secure communications in place for these types of plans and things they discuss.
This is indicative of, there is this, and I believe, and this is left and right, by the way, there is a resentment towards elites, and anything systemic is just treated as elite. That has turned into, we've seen this with vaccines, and we've seen this now, we're seeing it with economics and tariffs. There is a resentment towards experts. And I don't know if going to the Signal instead of using the secure channels is an anti-deep state mode or anti-whatever there was. But when we've done stuff, the government has to explain why they've done stuff for decades or what systems they've had. It's not a good enough answer to say, this is how we've always done it. But there's a reason these systems were established. And to just dismiss them and dismiss our security and dismiss how we keep this information secure just because that's how it's always been done, and to claim some anti-deep state or anti-expertise, we open ourselves to a lot of dangers. This is a dangerous world, and it's not only in foreign policy. We want to have vaccine hesitancy? Great. Measles are coming back in Texas.
Right. And then speaking of dangerous territory, our final issue of the day I want to touch on, you just had a 3-panel court in the DC appeals court agree with Justice Boasberg and his ruling that the Trump administration can't deport any more Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. The 2 judges in the majority, one appointed by H.W. Bush, one appointed by Obama for different reasons. The H.W. Bush said that this was the Alien Enemies Act that Trump is invoking, is specifically designed to propel military incursions, not migration. And then the Obama appointed judge says, well, the other issue is they were provided no due process. They had no opportunity to be heard and make their case that they weren't part of these gangs. You have people and the families of some of these immigrants saying they have no connection whatsoever to any of these gangs. You have minors that were sent over to El Salvador. They're now in these terrorism prisons, some of the worst prisons on earth, and we're paying them. These are for-profit prisons. The Trump administration is using government money to pay the El Salvadorian, not a dictator, but he's an autocrat. He's an aspiring autocrat. Where does this go next? Are they going to appeal this to SCOTUS? And what's the bigger issue here in this showdown with the courts that the Trump administration's having?
The biggest issue is that the courts stand right now, the biggest issue, as the last check. In a system of checks and balances, it's the only possible check at the federal level right now. Congress has laid down. Now, that may change over the summer, and as polls change, that may, but Congress has laid down. The administration, forget about the details right now. We know that the administration has this theory of a unitary executive. This is we kind of already have an imperial presidency, but this is a radical notion. Remember, everybody here has taken an oath to the Constitution, and still at this point, last I checked, maybe they can change that too. But Article 1 is Congress. There's an oath to the Constitution, not to a man, not to an ideology, and all the rest. In this case, thinking about the district judge, the fact that he questioned the Justice Department, show me where the planes were after my order, and the Justice Department said, no, we're not going to show you. And this is a great way to bring a full circle with our guest. That's how Turkey became a competitive authoritarian system to a full-blown autocracy. It got rid of checks. And if the courts don't play their role, then we're not a rule of law state anymore. We're a rule of man or a rule of men state. Frankly, I'm a little surprised that the administration does not want to go ahead and litigate this all the way up to the Supreme Court. They have a commanding majority at the Supreme Court. And there's probably ways that they could finagle and, finesse this policy in such a way that they would win at the Supreme Court.
And do you think that this is more of you talk about the Justice Department explicitly refusing to comply with Boasberg's request? Do you think instead of litigating it, they're trying to see what they can get away of in terms of?
Yes, absolutely.
Unreal.
Absolutely they are. Because, immigration is, we've seen this playbook. Immigration, Roe v. Wade, those are the highest profile type of issues. And even in immigration, let's be honest, the Biden administration started horribly its first 2 years, but by the time it left office, had gotten the border under control. So this is why they're making such a big deal about we're finding all these gang members and all the rest. It's a way to keep immigration as a number one issue because these caravans are not coming through. Interactions at the border are really low. So this is a great way to keep it up. But what they want to do is undermine at every level the administrative state. They want to reverse the New Deal, and they need to cow the courts to be the opposite of the switch in time that saved 9. Because the courts, let's remember our history of the New Deal, the courts at first were blocking the New Deal. The courts at first were FDR's worst enemy. So there are certain people in the administration and the Republican Party who want those courts to be their ally again, and to have a dismantle the New Deal and the administrative state.
Unreal. Well, we'll see what happens next. I mean, I'll be interested.
But by the way, as an admonishment to Democrats, because as I said before on national security, it's not a good enough answer to say, well, this is how we've done. We've had this administrative state for 70 years. There's a great book, and there's all kinds of literature being written about it. And you can go on his podcast or several podcasts and read the theory behind Ezra Klein's abundance. But clearly the administrative state and government in general has failed a lot of Americans. So Democrats have to turn around and say, as we discussed last week with Representative Swazi, we have a better vision. We will do better. We're sorry. We will try better. Yeah. And there is not that even I'm sorry yet. You have to tell the American people I'm sorry because you did fail them. Everybody failed them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things and one of the reasons I think people like Bernie Sanders and AOC connect with some of the energy in the same way that a Trump did and get these big rallies is because there's at least an acknowledgement, even if the solutions, we can debate, whatever, there's an acknowledgement that this has all failed. And this is just what's going on now is not working. So that's absolutely right. All right. With that, this was a great interview. For everybody watching what's going on in Turkey, I'll just say it again. The fact that it hasn't gotten any coverage at all, that you've got Trump cozying up to this guy, turning his country into a full-blown dictatorship in real time, jailing his opposition, jailing 1,400 protesters in a week. There are hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. I mean, you saw the footage at the beginning of this episode. It's truly remarkable. And the State Department's basically turning around and now figuring out whether we should give this guy weapons.
There's no upside for U.S.
no
national
upside.
security interests. There's no upside.
Yeah, it's unreal. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Not Your Daddy's America. We're streaming every week. Find us on the Really American YouTube channel, and then wherever you get your podcasts at Not Your Daddy's America. I'm Justin Horwitz. Yours truly, Endy Zemenides. Thanks so much for tuning in.
See ya.